Okay, so today we would digress a little bit from what we had covered last time. So in the last time, we actually introduced the concept of phonons, like what phonons are, what Fourier transform is, and during the in-class activity, we did the problem of Fourier heat transfer in one-dimensional object. So now our goal is to do the same problem for a small length scale like 100 nanometer or so, like in again in one dimension, but solve it where the Fourier law is not applicable. So we had described few conditions in the first lecture itself, like where the Fourier law is not applicable in time and length scale. So now we would look at the equations which could explain that kind of a behavior at that line, length and time scale. So today's lecture we would talk about this Boltzmann transport equation. So first we would talk about that, and then we would discuss its solution technique. So there are of course many solution techniques, deterministic and stochastic. So we would talk about the one of the stochastic approaches. And during the Sunday's lecture, we would do a the full lecture. We would do this hands-on exercise where we would implement this stochastic approach in a one-dimensional problem. So that stochastic approach would follow this Monte Carlo solution approach, and we would discuss like how to initialize, like how to proceed with the solution. Okay, so the content of the today's lecture would be the we would introduce this Boltzmann transport equation, and then you talk about this solution technique. As always, like in any equation we see, like first we have to define some initial conditions. So we would define some initial conditions like how many phonons we have, what are their positions, what is their frequency, what is their polarization, what is their wave vector. We would come back to all of this in detail. And then we would talk about boundary conditions, isothermal and adiabatic. And after that, we would talk about how phonon and phonon scatter. I think we have briefly discussed these Umklapp and normal processes. We would also talk about scattering of phonons with the impurity. So then we would look at few examples from the literature where they have applied this technique to verify the algorithm and what kind of errors do we expect from these type of solutions. So that's pretty much the content we would cover today. Okay, so this is a heavy slide, but let's go over it one by one. So we have already introduced the concept of phonon. So it's a vibrational energy of atoms, uh, like at which energy the atoms would vibrate collectively, and that energy is quantized. So basically, that quantum we call it a phonon. So phonon we could treat ensemble of traveling waves with a certain frequency v and group velocity vg and carrying with it energy of h mu. Okay, so let me describe what we mean by here. So basically, if you remember from the monoatomic chain or the diatomic chain, what we were doing, we were plotting omega and k. So omega omega is phonon energy and k is phonon wave vector we talk about. So h bar omega or h by 2 pi omega, which is equal to h mu. So h bar omega, so which is equal to h by 2 pi. So that is the energy term. Okay, so in this in monoatomic chain example, we saw okay there was a one of the phonon branches we were getting. So in during in this branch, like we could define certain omega. Like we could take certain, let's say this omega zero at some point k zero. We could take its slope also, which would be equal to some value of let's call it vg zero. So the energy of this is like h bar omega zero, or we could write it as h mu. So that we were that's exactly what we were describing in the last part. So where we are saying the phonon is an ensemble of like traveling wave with some frequency omega or we could refer it as omega by 2 pi is also equal to nu, so we could write it as omega as well, with certain group velocity Vg, which is just the slope of the curve, and it is carrying with its energy h mu. So if we are in a thermodynamic equilibrium, so in thermodynamic equilibrium, the temperature of the medium is going to be well defined. And at that temperature, the equilibrium occupation factor, like which is the mean value, like n, mean value of n, is given by the Bose-Einstein distribution. So basically, what it does is it tells us like how the phonons would be occupied, like probability of the occupation of a phonon, the phonons at a certain temperature. Basically, at very high temperature, like all the phonons would be occupied. At low temperature, there would be less probability of high energy phonons to be occupied. So that distribution is given by this mean of n value. So it's a 1 over exponential h bar omega by kBt. So this number becomes dimensionless. Both have a units of energy minus 1. So that's the mean phonon occupation factor. So we could think of it here if we assume t is infinity, like then exponential of this term would go towards 0. So exponential of 0 is 1. So the occupation factor actually approaches like basically the phonons would be fully occupied at like very high temperature. Okay, so there is another thing we are going to talk about here, which is vibrational energy, which we haven't talked about before. Like how much energy all the phonons have. Like basically, we call it total vibrational energy, or we could refer it to it as also internal energy. Like how much volume in a certain volume of L cube, what is the total energy? So if we look at E times V, E dot V we do, and we sum over all polarizations and all wave vectors. We would come back to this point again, and that is just sum of like all phonons, like what is their occupation, plus half h bar omega. So this half comes from the ground state energy, because even at 0 Kelvin, atoms are still vibrating, so they have a certain amount of energy associated with that. So basically, in the classical limit, like which we are more used to, like anytime we go to 0 Kelvin, the displacements would become 0. But that's not what happens in the quantum world. Like so, there is atoms are still going to vibrate. So we call them quantum fluctuation. They're going to still vibrate even at 0 Kelvin, and that energy contribution is represented by this half term. Okay, so let's talk about first what is P and what is K. So again, we would go back to our diatomic chain now. So omega versus K. So if you remember in the diatomic chain, we got some dispersion like this. So like P refers to the polarization, and K refers to the wave vector. So basically the K is the same quantity we are looking at x-axis. So for certain value of K, we could choose between one of these two branches. So in the diatomic chain also, like we could divide it into this mode. If you remember, we call it acoustic mode and we call it optic mode. So in the acoustic mode, all atoms were vibrating in the same direction, like at the k equal to 0. And in the optic mode, if you remember, they were vibrating in the opposite direction at k equal to 0. So we refer to them acoustic optic. If we go in 3D, if you remember, we had done transverse of acoustic, and there were two branches of transverse acoustic, and there was a one longitudinal branch, longitudinal acoustic. The similar way we would have optic, long transverse optic. So there would be two transverse optic branches, and there would be at higher energy there would be one longitudinal optic branch. So now there are several branches in 3D. We are looking along only one direction, and we could choose one of these branch. Like we could choose one of the polarization. So basically, we could choose transverse or longitudinal. So if we choose this branch, we would choose transverse polarization. If we choose this branch, then it would be a longitudinal acoustic polarization. So there are two quantities and we have to sum over all such polarizations. So basically we have to choose all the branches. That's what we mean by here. We have to choose all the branches and we have to sum over all the k points also. This basically if we want to determine the total vibrational energy, so we have to sum over all the k points in the system. So that's what we have written here, the sum over all the polarizations, sum over all the k points. Okay. So then this sum, we could actually convert it to the integral. So any summation in k, we could write it in a integral form if we discretize it fine enough. So it is become integral of this k, dk by 2 pi by L cube. So we are not going in detail like how does this exact factor come, but just remember we have converted this summation to the integral form. So as we already said, like we have summed over all the phonon, all the polarization, longitudinal optic, transverse optical, longitudinal acoustic, transverse acoustic, and all the wavelength. Okay, so now there is another important concept that comes here, which is how to go from k to this k of, so we could write k as just function of omega and p because it depends on phonon energy and polarization. How to transfer it from k space to the energy space, basically the omega space. So let's talk about like so here we will introduce the concept of d of omega d omega, which is d of omega is actually phonon density of state. So we would talk about what we mean by it, density of states. So these concepts actually could be applied in general. Like the concepts are very straightforward. They are not very uh, unique to this problem. So, but density of state is, so let's say we have a certain population, like let's say we took survey of 1,000 people, and we let's say simply ask about their age. What is their age group? So now if we have to draw a histogram of the people's age. So let's say we divided into 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and 60. So when we took the survey, all the 1,000 people were, uh, so we divided into different age groups. We asked about their age. So maybe in that 1,000 people, like when we found that was kind of a distribution, like so maybe that many people from certain age group represented, and above 60 then there was like all the above 60 and above like that were, so we might get this kind of a distribution, and if you look at the sum of all these area, it would be 1,000 because we took survey of 1,000 people, like so maybe let's say this is 60, this is let's say 100, this is 80, and so on we could say. So these are number of people who said their age is between 0 and 10. So we could build a histogram in this way, like age versus like her number of people. So what we could do further is like instead of dividing into uh, this term, like we could say, okay, we what we would do is we would actually further make it smaller age groups. Like we want even finer distribution. So we say, okay, we would bin it in terms of every 5 age groups. Okay, so every five, maybe up to 0 to 5 were that many, and 5 to 10 were this much. Then 5 to 15, let's say they were high. So we would get a even finer distribution than the previous one. But it's the still same 1,000 people are there, which we are counting. We are just dividing into bins. So the point I want to drive home here is, let's say we increase this 1,000 people, we ask the age, like we are increased to let's say like 1 lakh people, and we could divide it further. So basically, we could even make the our group sizes smaller, and eventually, once we keep making smaller and smaller, we would start getting a very smooth distribution. So you would see we could actually find some kind of a smooth distribution to this. Like as we make these bins smaller and smaller, like we would get a smaller and smaller like bins, and the distribution would start becoming smooth instead of this bar-like chart. So exactly the same thing like what we did here, we are going to do with the phonemes now. Like how we build this histogram of number of like age of number of people, and we as we increase the number of people, this distribution becomes smooth and smooth because each bin would have a decent number of people, so that would like would be a representative number for that age group. Okay, so let's do the same thing for phonons now. So let's say we now type h bar omega. We say this is the phonon energy, h bar omega, and we look at how many like we call this y-axis density of state, which has a unit of whatever the energy unit is. Let's call it in energy unit is MeV, so it would be in MeV first. So if you remember in the previous curve, like if we took the area, so if we count this number of people, like here we represented directly by the number of people, so we didn't have to take the area. But here what we are writing is like we have to take the area to find out the total number. So basically there also if we had divided by y-axis by the bin size, let's say if the bin size was 5, if we had divided y-axis by bin size, then we have to take area to find number of people. So same thing we are here, we are dividing the bin size by bin size. So what we are saying is, or let's say there are phonons at like we group them in certain frequency level, and we say 0 to 5, like if we take this area would denote how many phonons are there. So we have now divided by the bin size, that's why the area would be number of phonons. Same thing we could do for 5 to 10, then 10 to 15, then we could do 20. And as usual, we could keep making it smooth and like we could decrease the bin size and we would get smooth and smooth. Eventually, we would get some kind of a uniform distribution, and that we would call the density of states. If you take the area of that curve, that would denote the number of phonons in a system. So that essentially is the density of states. And this is the quantity, something which we could measure experimentally using, let's say, the neutrons or with the X-rays. Like these are the techniques with which, or maybe if we don't have some low energy phonons, maybe electrons as well. So we could do use certain experimental techniques to measure like this phonon density of states. So as you already know, like this omega, the k versus omega, like they are dependent on each other, k and omega. So we have converted the integral from this k space to the omega space. So they are equivalent, it doesn't matter. So now that's why this concept of d omega came. So now we are integrating all the occupation factor, like an ground state energy, basically all the energy in the system. And we are saying, okay, now like this is our density of states versus omega, like how many phonons are there with a particular bin, and we would multiply by that number, and then we would get all our like all our internal energy or the vibrational energy we would obtain. And then you would sum over all the polarization. Actually, the phonon DOS contains all the polarization information also if we get it experimentally. So we don't have to sum over polarization in that case. Is this part clear? Because this is something we have to be absolutely clear. This phonons density of state, because these things would keep coming up again and again. And in the uh, in class exercise also, if you do like there also we would give you the data of the density of states with which we have to calculate this non-Fourier heat transfer. So this part has to be like very crystal clear, like what we are doing here. Okay, so if there are no questions, so what we could do is like in converting this d of omega from the dk space, like so that if we look at how does this expression come, so how we could write d of omega in terms of k. So it's basically 4 pi k square dk by 2 pi by cube by d omega. So how this comes is, let's say this is our reciprocal space. We have a bunch of points. We take a sphere, like in 2D it look like a circle, but it's a sphere of radius k, and then we increase the radius by dk. So the area of this shell is 4 pi k square dk, and the total volume of this is 2 pi cube. So exactly that's what is written here, 4 pi k square dk area, and the total is 2 pi cube divided by d omega. So our density of state is like if we do this 4 pi k square dk divided by 8 pi cube, so one of the pi cancel out. So we are left with k square by 2 pi square dk by d omega. And if you remember, like the slope of d, so basically this d omega by dk is group velocity. So dk by d omega is inverse of group velocity. So we could write d of omega as k square by 2 pi square 1 over vg. Okay, so we have determined all the internal energy. So all this part, like we have done. Like okay, we know all the energy of the system. So now coming to this Boltzmann transport equation, like what it is. So what it is actually this is a BT for phonons, the transport
Hello.
equation. Yes, okay, Yogesh.
Sir, actually, the Boltzmann equation and Monte Carlo are definitely they are very uh, latest technique, I think. And whenever I heard personally, I'm saying I get afraid of this thing. So I am trying to listen carefully if I can understand what is how we need to go ahead with Boltzmann equation.
Right, right, sure. I think you would understand. We would go very slowly. Like I'm going really, really slowly, and this is the equation what we have written on this slide, and I would describe it what it is, and then we
Okay.
would come to the solution of this equation using Monte Carlo technique.
Yes, yes. Okay, sir.
Yep. So actually, all the equation we have talked about till this point, like all the vibrational energy and everything, like the density of state Vg, like they describe the state of a phonon, one particular phonon we have talked about. So now we are going to talk about this ensemble of particles, like all the ensemble of these phonons. So basically, what Boltzmann transport equation is like it's a equation describing the transport of this ensemble of particles, or we refer to them as a stochastic particles. Okay, so let me say this like, so this is a stochastic realization of a system evolving under the non-equilibrium transient Boltzmann dynamics. Okay, so let's see what it is. So we have here like in this term some like this f, which is a single particle probability distribution function. So basically, like this is a function of like some time, position, and wave vector. So the position vector would have x, y, z. K would also have kx, ky, kz, and then time. So this is a variable of like seven. So f is a function of seven variables. So basically, we have taken this ensemble of phonos, like this is a transport equation, like which it describes. So the left hand side of this equation is represents the drift, like which deviates the particle from its equilibrium position. So basically, particle would become out of equilibrium, and then the right hand side is a collision term, which would or the scattering term, which would bring it back to the equilibrium position. So let's look at it in more detail. So as I just said, like the right hand side would make these particles to drift from one place to another. So basically you could solve the left hand side equation and you would get something like R. So you put right hand side equal to 0, you would get some R nu equal to R old plus Vg times delta T. So basically what it's telling us, like if there was a new old position and we have to go to the new position, like We have to go by group velocity time, whatever the time we want to travel. So basically, in this way, the particle it represents the drift of the particle. So if the particle is drifting, like then we have this like equilibrium. We are losing the equilibrium. So there is a departure from the equilibrium. So this left hand side represents the departure from equilibrium. But this scattering term, like basically now the phonon are going to scatter, or phonon is going to scatter with the impurity. So this right hand side would try to bring back that equilibrium. So it would restore this equilibrium. So as we had just said, like this is a f is a function of like 7 independent variables. Like one is time, then three is x, y, z, and three wave vector kx, ky, v, kz. And because of this region only, like it's very hard to solve this problem deterministically because there are so many variables like on which this function depends on. Okay, now to find the scattering term, like what is the scattering term? Let's say this phonon was propagating. So this is a phonon scattering term, and and the new state is being generated. Let's say. So what it denotes is scattering from state k prime. Like so that let's say there is a some state k prime to k. So this denotes the scattering rate. Like at what rate the phonons would scatter from one state k prime. So let's say this state was k prime. This is the final state k. Like at what rate these phonons would scatter from k prime to k, and then the, the distribution function corresponding to that to the ensemble of phonons, and the reverse process would also be happening like k to k prime scattering. And what is the difference? If both the functions are same, like then there is a no collision. Like then we are in a thermal equilibrium condition. So then there is no need to restore the equilibrium. So we are already in the equilibrium condition. Okay. So Yogesh, is it clear? Like what we are saying here?
Yes, sir. Slightly. Sir,
Uh,
one thing I would like to ask.
yep.
This Lattice-Boltzmann equation is very common. Means at several places people used to use this equation.
Right.
So this is the general form, or is it slightly modified for this purpose? Like for the
Right now, the equation we have written on the slide, it's a very generic form, and slowly and gradually, the depending on what f we use, like that all translates to like. So we would drive this equation to the form of phonons. As we
okay,
said,
okay,
we would write this mean occupation factor as 1 over e to the power h bar omega by kbt. So this f is
okay.
essentially denotes like how this mean occupation factor or that would evolve with the time. Because if
Right, right.
equilibrium condition, then this is the number. But if it's not a equilibrium condition, then this would change and how that evolves with the time. Later on, we would change this form to energy conservation and we would linearize also. But at this point, like it is important to understand like how this equilibrium distribution would evolve. So this equation right now is in a very generic form, but later on we would convert, like depending on what f we use, we would convert
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yep. Okay, so now we are coming to this solution technique, Monte Carlo solution technique. So basically, what we have to do is like we have to draw the samples from six individual stochastic spaces, like three wave vector and three positions. So let me first describe simply, like it's a very traditional example of a Monte Carlo type approach. Like what it is, like let's say we have to find a area of a circle and we have a let's say dart board and we are going to throw the dart. So basically think of it as a like dart board where you hit any part with the equal probability and then you're going to hit the dart inside it. So let's say we want to find the ratio of area of circle to the area of square. So the this is a. So the this is also a. So the area of circle is going to be pi a square by 4 and the area of square is a square. So the ratio of circle to the area of square So the area of square divided by area of circle is a square by pi a square by 4. So it becomes 4 by pi. So if we know area of circle to square, let's say we need to determine the value of pi. That was how people actually approached this initially. So that would be equal to 4 times AC by AS. So basically, like if you throw it with equal probability, the dart, like some points would fall here, some outside, some inside, some outside. And in the end, let's call it like how many points fall inside and how many points are outside. So that would give you the idea of AC over AS. The more number of darts you throw, like that would give you even high precision. Like, but the just keep in mind the error would go down as a square root of number, as it's a problem with all statistical like these type of cases. So we would get this value of pi. The more number of darts we throw, like more. So basically, we would calculate how many darts within the circle are there and how many are outside. The ratio of it would give you the value of pi. The similar way we are doing here. So we are taking a lot of particles. You take particles from different 6 individual stochastic spaces. So basically, we would choose particle at different positions at different wave vectors, and we would make it go through this equation. Like, so previously we were throwing, let's say, the darts on the board. Like right now in this condition, like where we have to involve this stochastic variables, so we would make it pass through that equation and we would see how the distribution would come after like the particles pass through this equation. So that's the same concept we are going to apply. So basically, in this case, these samples first we would allow to drift. Basically, if we take, let's say, one of the particle, like one of the ensemble of at position x, y, z, and kx, ky, kz, and let's say we allow it to drift, then the particle would start drifting through this part. As I said, like it would be some r nu equal to r old plus vg delta t. So they would drift from one position to another, and then they could scatter. Like then there is a scattering probability we have to implement. So we could treat this in a two-step process. Like one is where particles are allowed to drift or unrestrained motion, and then they would scatter in time. So after they have scattered, like we would collect their statistics and we would try to like in both time and space, and we could process the final information. Let's say we are interested in heat transfer, the flux, or the some macroscopic observable, let's say temperature. So we could extract those variables from this distribution, like whatever the final distribution we would. Okay, so now the very first step which comes like in this solution. So we have talked about the equation, but now the comes the solution part. I should mention like most of the details in this lecture has like especially the equations have come from this reference. So you could look up on the internet uh, like this reference, and you would find a lot of these equations. Not lot actually, pretty much all of the equations you would find in this reference. This is a pretty good reference, like where it describes very cleanly like how these equations came about and how to solve it. Okay, so the very first condition we have is like finding how many phonons are there. So basically, we have to initialize the states of ensemble of phonons, because in our case, the phonon would propagate through this equation, and we would find what its stochastic space is afterwards. Then we whatever its distribution is, and then we would collect that statistics, then post process to get this macroscopic variable. So before we do it, we need to find this number of phonons, and the number of phonons, as we had discussed earlier, so it would be given by this mean occupation number at a certain of a certain energy at I, and the density of state of that variable. So basically, if you remember, we just talked about omega versus d of omega curve, which might look like something like this. So what we are saying is that there is a frequency at a certain point omega 0 I. If we multiply this width size is delta omega I, so we are saying whatever this denotes the number of phonons, but that number of phonons we have to multiply by the phonon occupation factor, or this Bose-Einstein distribution, and we have to sum over all such bins. So maybe like we have divided into total number of NB bins. So total number of bins here, like 1, 2, 3, like that would be. So we have divided into NB bins. So we sum over all the bins and then we would get the number of phonemes. We could take integral also, like the summation, like if we bin it very finely, then we could also take a summation. So that's not the problem. Okay, I think we have already defined all the variables listed here. So here we have excluded this 0 point number, like which came from basically like there is a phonemes are still latents are still vibrating at 0 point. So we have excluded that part. Okay, so let's say if we do this calculation, like how many phonemes are there. So this is usually like a extremely large number. So even if we take a small temperature, let's say 80 Kelvin. So this N, if you remember, like it depends on the this H, like mean value defined H bar omega by KBT minus 1. So if we take, let's say at 80 Kelvin, like if we take silicon, so we know like what is the energy of silicon. Like so we could take some mean energy and we would find roughly like number of phonons per meter cube in silicon at this temperature would be 4.5 10 per 22. Now you could think this is a extremely large number, like by no means it's a small number. So this is a extremely large number. So of course we cannot simulate that many particles, like this extremely large number would be extremely hard to simulate. So what we do in this case is we define a scaling factor, like so the scaling factor is like how many actual number of phonons are there and how many we want. So basically how many we want, let's say like we just want, let's say 10 to the power 6, we would multiply this factor W, like with which we have scaled, and we would get this actual number. So basically, since we cannot simulate that many number of phonons, so instead what we do, we prescribe, okay, like we would simulate 10 to the power 6 particles. So that's why we have divided, we have found this factor W, which just defines like how many actual phonons were there and how many we are prescribing. Okay, so the first part we are done. So we have found how many number of phonons are there in a system. So like we are doing initial conditions as of now. So now we come to the position part, like how to find out the position of a particle. Okay, so that's a like simple procedure again. Like I think all of you probably know like how to get this position like in 2D and 3D. So in a 2D, the smallest cell would be like a triangle. Like so, let's say you have any 2D body, you could always divide it into the triangles. And within a triangle, like, you could find what are their like we could express what would be the coordinate system. Like so, let's say this is a triangle. Like this is a, and any point in between this triangle, let's say P. But first we have to define our basis vector. So basis vector we would define A, B like this. So basis vectors are essentially like if we have like x, y, z axis. So x, y, z. So basis vectors are in this case x, y, z. So any point we could represent using a combination of some x, y, z. Like we have to multiply, let's say a x hat plus b y hat plus c z hat. So we could find any r vector using that combination. Same way, like in triangle, like they are not orthogonal a and b vector, but these are our basis vector a and b. And let's say we want to find a position p. So position p we could write in terms of some constant r1, some constant r2. Then we would multiply them with the basis vector. And ra is our initial position. So basically the position with respect to, let's say our origin is somewhere here where the 0, 0 is there. So this position is Ra. So the P position would be Ra plus R1 like A, R2 B. And A, B and R the basis vectors in that space. Okay, so this is in 2D. In 3D, similarly, like you could make a tetrahedron. Like it's a simple tetrahedron. So you're more familiar with, let's say, cubes, like you could make cubes, but cube is not the smallest unit you could represent. Like it's not like it's although maybe simpler to use, but like in terms of elegance, like you would prefer to use this tetrahedron. Again, the tetrahedron concept is very similar. Like you have three basis vectors, like A, B, and then A, B, and the C. And let's say you want to find some point P. You want to find some point P, so they could be written in a combination of these three basis vectors A, B, C. So basically, again, if origin is here, R is the initial position, and then the A, B, C basis vectors, and R1, R2, R3 are some random. So one thing to note is these are R1, R2, R3. So if we have to choose some random position, because we have to take this stochastic sampling. So if we choose some random, we have to find any random point in between. So we could take R1, R2, R3 as a random number between 0 and unity, and that would give us the entire domain. Basically, if we sample enough and enough, we could cover the entire all points. Like all of the points we could cover, and that's our intention is basically to cover the entire xyz space and kx kz space. So that's how you could draw the particles like in a 2D or a 3D problem. In 1D it becomes really straightforward. Okay, so the next is so we are done with the initial conditions, number of phonons we are done with. We are done with the initial positions as well, like where to draw the position of a particle. So now comes the point. So we have to uh, draw the phonon frequencies, like how to draw the phonon frequency out, like because there are so many omegas also available. If you look at omega and k, like there are so many possible values of omega are there. So how to draw that one particular value? Okay, so first thing is the number of phonons, like which we had determined before. Like we could also divide that if we determine directly from the density of state of the total system, then we don't have to multiply with the polarization. But if we divide the density of states in like longitudinal and transverse polarization, then we have to take density of state of the longitudinal phonons and the transverse phonons. And transverse branches, if you remember, let's assume both to be identical. Then there would be two of such branches and one of longitudinal branches. So that would give us the total number of phonons in a system. Okay, so but let's see how to draw the now the phonon frequency. There are a few things let me talk about here. So basically, we are assuming like TA branches, there are two TA branches, and both of them we are assuming identical. That's why this factor of 2 comes. So let's say this is transfer acoustic branch. And then we have the longitudinal acoustic branch. So basically this maximum value, we are calling it omega max of LA. And this one is we are calling omega max of TA. And let's say then frequency space we could divide into some spectral integrals. So let's say between 0 and omega LA max, we could divide it into, let's say, 1000 bins. So we could choose this number like this NB, how many bins we want to divide this frequency axis in compared to the maximum value. So that would give us this spectral interval, like what is the interval between the different omega I. Okay. So now how to draw that particle? Like, so what we are writing here is a cumulative number density function. So let's first look at, probably you're all familiar with the cumulative function, but let me briefly describe what cumulative function is. So let's say we have a certain function, let's say it's given by something like this, call it some function with respect to x. And if we have to find the cumulative function of the same function, so basically the cumulative function of it. So what we do is we take the integral. Like let's say we have to find up to this value. Like what is the cumulative function at this point? So what we would do, we would take the area of the curve before that point, like starting from the beginning, and whatever that value comes, we would denote it at this point. So once we take area, so let's say we have to find cumulative function here. Like let me change the color. Let's say we have to find cumulative function here. So what we would do is we would take area up to all of this area to account. So basically all the new area like we are coming, like that would be of course greater than the previous one. So in this case, if you take area, like maybe you would reach here. So let's say now we have to take it at this point, cumulative function. So then you would take all the area of this. So it would be a monotonically increasing function if if the entire function is positive. So let's say then we have to find maybe to the final point, and then we would take the entire area. So basically at the final value, it would give you the entire area of the curve. So that's the cumulative function. So what we have done, same thing we have done with the phonon. So the phonon distribution was something like this, omega versus k, and then you integrate. So now we are making the omega into the x-axis, and we would integrate this curve. So it would look something like so it would reach some maximum value, like it would reach, and that would be your cumulative function of this. So this cumulative function, like we could divide it into 1,000 bins. So basically, if we take any function in between, so let's say we are normalizing our distribution with the cumulative function. So the maximum value we could reach is 1. And if we draw a random number between 0 to 1, we would fall into certain frequency range. Let's call that frequency some omega. And that's what we were describing in the last slide. So let's look at it. So basically here we are writing this normalized cumulative number density function. So this Fi, on the bottom we have the total area, like basically the total cumulative function. So like we have summed over all the bins, and here up to the bin we are going to. So basically, if we have to write this cumulative function with respect to omega, so that's our cumulative function. So basically, this is this final value, and let's say up to ith point is this value. Basically, since we have normalized with the final value, this maximum value of this Fi is 1. Okay, so then we could draw a random number, like if we have to find which frequency is. Let's say this random number comes between these two bins. So we draw the random number. So this is our Fi minus 1. This is our Fi, because this y-axis is varying between 0 to 1. So let's say this random number comes between this. So then we could project it back, and then we could find which omega it would lie into. So that would be our omega range. But this omega range would get one particular value. So just to make it continuous, what we would do is like take the center value of that bin, omega 0I, but also multiply by the same random number and the width of that bin, so that the entire variable becomes continuous. So if we don't do that procedure, like so we would only take the middle value of this bin, but we also want values on the side, and that's what we are doing here to get a continuous omega. So basically, to draw the frequency, the principle is very straightforward. So you take a dispersion relation, like of let's say L and TA. You draw the cumulative function and you normalize it with the maximum value so that it lies between 0 to 1. You draw a random number. If that random number probably would lie between some Fi minus 1 to Fi, then you could look up where that would lie in the omega. So you could choose that particular value of a omega. Okay, so is this part clear, like to everyone, like how we have done? So we have done now the number of phonons, we have done positions, and now we have just finished distribution of frequency also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bit clear.
Okay, so let's go to the next step now. polarization, like how to choose the polarization. So basically we had this curve, like if you remember diatomic chain, so we could have a diatomic chain in, let's say, in 3 dimension, we would have 6 branches. So basically transfer acoustic 1, transfer acoustic 2, longitudinal acoustic, then transfer optic 1, transfer optic 2, longitudinal optic. So we have to now choose what is the polarization of these. Or here, when we are taking this example, or in the example problem we would do in the on Sunday, we would also, sorry, omega versus k, we would choose only diatomic chain, like where we like we could choose just monoatomic chain, but moving in 2 dimensions, like so we have x and y variables. So one mode would be LA and another mode would be TA. So among these modes, like we could choose like which mode to pick. Okay, so we choose the omega value. Like that omega value would intersect with let's say 2 modes. Like we want to know which mode, which polarization to choose also. So that polarization could be defined by this Ni, like what is the like the factor corresponding to LA and the total factor like TA and LA. So you could define it as a multiply by the density of states and the number of phonons. So basically the number of phonons in the LA branch and number of phonons in the TA branch. So we have multiplied this mean occupation factor with the density of states of the LA mode and to the total number of phonons. So this factor of 2 comes because we have 2 TA branches which are identical. So again, we could draw a random number. If that random number is less than this factor, like so what we have done is number of phonons in the LO mode divided by total number of phonons. So let's say the number of phonons in LA mode was 40, total number of phonons let's say is 80. So this factor becomes 0.4. So let's say this factor becomes 0.4. If we draw a random number, if that random number comes out, let's say 0.1. If so, it is less than the this value 0.4. So it would belong to the LA branch. So we could say, okay, this would be our LA phonon. If it belongs to the, let's say, if this number comes out to be random number comes out to be 0.6, then you would say it would belong to the TA branch. So this way we could select a polarization of the system, like either it is a LA mode or a TA mode. The problem. Okay. So now we have done number of phonons. Like we are still doing the initial condition. We have done number of phonons. We have done initial positions. We have done frequency, and we have done polarization. So next step is to define the phonon wave vector. Like what would be the phonon wave vector? So like once we know this omega value, like once we know this omega value and the polarization, we could determine what is the k value directly. So the once the that's what is written, the once the phonon frequency has been sampled, the wave vector could be determined directly using the this phonon dispersion relation. If it's in a 3D, like then there would be 3 variables kx, ky, and kz. Or if we, let's say we want to assume isotropy, then we could determine the kx, and this would be equal to both ky and kz because we have assumed isotropic. So the magnitude would be square root of 3 times kx, or like k in 2D it would be square root of 2 times kx. But the direction of wave vector, now like we have to define this direction of wave vector. So I think you're all familiar with we could write let's say some angle psi. So basically, if it's going in this direction, so we could write it cos psi, and this would become sin psi in 3D and 2D. Sorry. So that's what we have written here. Like in 2D, the vector could be cos psi and sin psi, and we could draw a random number because this vector could change. This wave vector direction could vary between 0 and 2 pi. So we could take random number R2 and we could multiply by 2 pi. So basically the psi would vary from 0 to 2 pi. But let's say if we go to the 3D problem. In the 3D, like I think you might be already familiar with it. So let's say this is our 3D sphere. So let me see which variable I was using there. Okay, so let's say there is a wave vector, like let me use it, which is at angle theta from here. And if you project it on this space, like from this x and y, this angle is psi. So basically the polar angle is theta and the azimuthal angle is psi. So now let's say this is x, this is y, this is z. So basically the z axis would become just cos theta, like, because the projection of this vector onto the z axis would just become cos theta. So the z component is cos theta. So now we are projecting this component here. So this becomes sine theta if we bring it down. If we are going towards the x axis, so let's call this angle psi, this angle with the x axis. So sine theta cos phi, cos psi. That would be our component along x axis. And y axis would be sine theta, sine psi. So in the 3D, we have to draw a direction, like we could draw these two random numbers, theta and psi. And again, theta could vary from -1 to 1 as well. Like, so the cos theta could vary from -1 to 1, as you could see to complete this entire circle. So psi, if psi is varying from 0 to 2 pi, so theta could vary from here to here. Okay. So that's what is written here. In 3D, the wave vector becomes sine theta cos phi, sine theta sine phi, and cos theta. So we could determine the wave vector's direction completely this way. Okay, so we are done with the initial conditions now. So in the initial conditions, we did a number of phonons, initial positions, frequencies, polarizations, and wave vector. Okay, so now the next we are coming to the boundary conditions. So there are two most common type of boundary conditions we use here. Like one is this isothermal part, like the isothermal boundary condition, which you are more familiar with, and which we did in class exercise in last Sunday. Like we applied at the one of the end 303 Kelvin and another end 297 Kelvin. So this is like a isothermal boundary condition. Or we could define a flux in the system, like we could say prescribed heat flux on the boundary. Like if it prescribed heat flux is 0 on the boundary, then we could refer it to as a adiabatic boundary. And we could take other type of boundary conditions like periodic, specular, diffusive. So I think we have gone over that, but let me describe again. So in the specular boundary condition, if a phonon is incident on a plane, like let's say any boundary, like any angle it comes in, it goes out with the exactly the same angle. In the diffusive boundary condition, what would happen is, like let's say phonon is coming at a certain angle theta. Afterwards, it could go in any random direction. Its direction is not fixed. And you could have a combination between, again, you could draw a random number if it would be partially specular or something. Okay. So if we look at this isothermal wall, like so isothermal wall, we could treat it as a like a analogous to a black wall, like of photon radiation. So basically anything which strikes that wall get thermalized with it. So basically what we mean to say is, like, because this wall is maintained to some bath, like at certain temperature, let's say 303 Kelvin. So anything which strikes that actually get thermalized with that wall, and that thing also becomes at the same temperature as the isothermal temperature of the wall we have defined. Okay, so now this boundary, like anything which strikes it, like gets absorbed, like so, and it would thermalize with it. But the boundary now could emit the phonons, like basically the from the boundary, phonons could emit into the computational domain. And this, how the boundary would emit, like that would be governed by this Bose-Einstein statistics, which we had defined before, like corresponding to the temperature. Whatever that temperature is corresponding to the temperature, we would find this Bose-Einstein statistics, like which we had defined earlier, and corresponding that the phonon would emit into the system. So, but the phonon which would emit, let's say the particle which came before, like which hit the wall, it got thermalized. But the phonon, the new phonon which would emit into the system now, it has nothing to do with the particle which was incident on the boundary and which got absorbed. So this new particle is completely independent of the previous particle. It would emit from this isothermal distribution, sorry, this isothermal boundary corresponding to this Bose-Einstein statistics. So basically, the particle is completely independent of the state of what incident particle was. Okay, so if we have to like look at how the particles would be emit from this boundary phase, like so, let's say this area is dA. This is our boundary dA. So the area as written is dA. Normal to that boundary is n hat. S hat is the direction the particle is thing. So this is our S hat direction. And again, we have defined two angles, like one is the polar angle theta and azimuthal angle psi. So the number of phonons which would emit from the boundary, like of course they would be proportional to the area A and the delta t time we are considering, like where they would be emitted. So of course they would be proportional to, let's say, a certain frequency phonon would emit from the wall, so it would be proportional to this occupation number. And for the flux, we have to multiply by this Vg, but we are looking at perpendicular to the boundary, so we have to take a dot product with this n hat. And of course, to find the number of particles, we have to multiply this occupation factor with the density of states times delta omega. And of course, this is only one of the particle I, like at a certain frequency. If you remember, like this is omega versus k, so this is one particular particle I. We have to sum over all the bins we have defined here, like all the NB bins we have defined here, and we have to take all the polarization. Basically, if there are more branches, we have to sum over all the branches. Okay, so that defines the number of phonons emitting from a boundary phase of certain area A and at one particular temperature T. Okay, so the like whenever the in the, like when we are numerically implementing, like which you would do in your Sunday's class, like so any phonon incident on a isothermal wall would be like we would tally it like it has arrived, and then it would be deleted from the simulation. So we would delete that particle from our simulation, like the incident phonon has arrived, like it got thermalized with the boundary. So this would provide us the NAS incident energy like this during this time delta t, because we have to do this energy conservation. So the particle which came, like it tells us okay how much energy has was incident, and from here we could also determine how much energy this wall would contribute to the system. So overall energy conservation we have to maintain. Okay, so now this is a isothermal wall. Like of course the particle from the wall could only emit in this hemisphere. They cannot go back. So the particle could emit in any of the angle in this hemisphere, which I've drawn here. Okay, so the particles could be emitted in any solid angle 2 pi. So basically the solid angle of an entire sphere is 4 pi. Now we have a hemisphere, so the particle could get emitted in any of these solid angles of 2 pi. So then, if they emit over all solid angle 2 pi, then you could derive like this number of phonons emitted from the face would be a over pi delta t. And again, the same factor which we had found earlier. Again, from the face, there would be lot many particles which would get emitted. The number of phonons would be quite large in number, as we had calculated for the initial number of phonons. So, of course, we cannot take into account that many 10 to the power 22 number of phonons. So, again, we have to divide it by our W factor, which we found initially when we were deciding, okay, like let's say we only want to propagate 10 to the power 6 particles. So we found this W factor. So, the number of phase phonons emitted from face also would be normalized with respect to that condition. Okay. So now what is the location of a phonon determined by uh, like drawing the random number. So basically, let's say this is the boundary, and from it the phonon has to emit. So we could draw a random number over the entire face, and whatever position that random number comes in, like we could emit the particle from that position from the wall, and we could distribute uniformly phonons uniformly over this entire surface. Okay, so the frequency of this emitted phonon, like this magnitude of a wave of the wave vector, the polarization of phonon can be like whatever phonon we would emit from this part, the phase. So all the procedure we have defined earlier, like what would be the phonon frequency of that phonon, or what would be the magnitude of the wave vector, or the polarization. We could follow the procedure we followed for the initial condition. So the only change which would come here is like previously when we were emitting from the like initial condition, there we were taking this volumetric number density, but here we are emitting from the phase. So we have to like replace it with the phase number flux. And the direction of wave vector depends on the surface normal of the surface, like which we had found earlier, like sine theta cos phi, sine theta sine phi, and cos theta m cap. So is the emission from isothermal boundary clear?
Yes, sir. But one thing I would like to ask,
Yep.
the term emission, when we are calling emission, so it represents what? When we are giving heat, by which phonons are coming out or what?
What do you mean by initial like
Emission,
air
emission.
initial where like so the initial conditions we defined.
Right.
So initial conditions are always at t equal to 0, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But here we are defining the isothermal boundary is present at all times. Like it is not only present at t equal to 0.
Okay. At certain boundary.
Yeah, certain boundary condition basically, whatever boundary we have.
Mm-hmm. And okay.
So any other
Uh,
question?
sir, as you were saying, emission of phonons, na?
Right.
Emission. So emission term coming from the what means phonons are coming due to the heat that is given to the boundary.
Right. No, heat like because there is a isothermal boundary, like it is at certain temperature, right? So any phonon which is incident on that boundary,
Okay.
like it would get absorbed with that boundary because we assumed it like a black body, and that
Right.
phonon would get thermalized with it. So then the
Okay.
system would forget what arrived here, and
Right.
then the boundary would emit a particle
Okay.
like such that we maintain the energy balance. So the boundary would emit the particle with respect to the temperature distribution the isothermal boundary has. Like so, following this Bose-Einstein statistics at that particular temperature, and then it would emit the particle following what we have been describing, like what would be the phase number flux and all this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sir.
Okay, so then we move to the next part, the adiabatic boundary condition. So the adiabatic wall basically this would act as a perfect reflector for phonons. So we have already talked about this adiabatic wall, like anything incident on it would exactly reflect back. So it's more like a mirror to the phonons. So most surfaces, irrespective of their polish, like there would be some partially reflector. So in most surfaces, like ideally, like unless you make it really atomically precise, like what would happen is the reflection for not all wavelengths would be specular. So perfect specularity condition is this, but in reality, it's not perfectly specular. Like it could be a combination of after scattering, it could be diffusive also. That's a perfectly diffusive condition. So there might be a specularity like in between. Like so, let's say perfectly specular, we call it zero. Like if it's a if it's diffusely reflecting, and if we call it unity, if it's a perfectly specular. So now, if we have to find whether the particle would scatter specularly or diffusively, we could draw again a random number between 0 to 1. So let's say that random number came out to be zero point 0.7. And our degree of specularity, let's say, is zero point 0.5. So we find the random number is greater than zero point 0.5. So, so then we could choose like it would be diffusely reflected. And if it's a greater than random number, then it would be specularly reflected. So that way we could consider in our algorithm like the degree of specularity. We don't have to make it perfectly specular or perfectly diffusely specular. Just by drawing random numbers like and comparing with our the probability we want of specular reflection, we could define the how the boundary should affect. So the simply the when the particle strikes an adiabatic boundary, uh, we draw this random number first. If the random number is less than the prescribed value of d, the phonon would be specularly reflected, or you could diffusely reflect. It's up to you how you want to choose it. If it's specularly reflective, like so basically this SR reflected wave vector. So what I've drawn here simply by this in the mathematical form, it is reflected wave vector is along SI plus 2 times SI dot n cap, basically n cap direction. So the reflected vector is SI plus 2 times if you take a dot product with n cap and along that n cap direction. So this is what we have drawn, this theta and theta are equal. So this is just a mathematical approximation of that. So otherwise you could diffusely reflect the particle. So this, if it's a perfectly specular condition, like let's say it goes exactly at the angle theta, then there is a no resistance to the flow of phonons. So basically, like perfectly specular boundary conditions, like the phonons were going in the direction, like it is still propagating the same direction. So there is no resistance to the flow per se. But if it's a diffusely reflective boundary, then the phonon could also turn back. Then there is a resistance to the flow. Basically, the if there are only adiabatic boundaries on the sides, like so, then it's equivalent to having like a one-dimensional object. Basically, the flow is only happening in a certain direction. It won't pose any resistance to the flow whatsoever. But if a diffusely reflective boundary, then the particle could turn back, and then there is a flow disturbance. Basically, the flow of the particle has been reversed. Okay, then the drift part, like so now we have finished our boundary conditions. We have finished so the periodic boundary condition we would define in the next lecture. So now we would come to the drift part, like how the particles would drift. So what happens, like as we said, this equation, like in this equation, the left part denotes the drift of the particles, and the right hand side brings like so that disturbs the thermodynamic equilibrium, and right hand side tries to brings back that thermodynamic equilibrium. So the particles could move with the velocity, this Vg, the phonon group velocity, and they would hit each other, like they would get scattered. And they could also get scattered by the intrinsic scattering, like boundaries, or let's say the material is always not precise, like let's say these are the atoms, maybe one of the atoms is not present in between, so there are some kind of defects, or maybe there is an impurity here, or dislocations like which you are probably familiar with already, or electrons. So basically it could get scattered by many things, and there could be internal grains also within the sample. It could also get scattered by that. So all these scattering events would try to bring back the thermodynamic equilibrium back to its like basically bring back the thermodynamic equilibrium. Okay, so in the numerical scheme, what we do is like the events occurring at within a time step delta t. So we split it into two distinct sequential phases like drift and scattering. So we separate them out. So first we put right hand side completely equal to 0. So if we solve this differential equation, so basically during this drift phase where the right hand side is 0, the phonons would move linearly from one location to another, and then we could track directly using this first order integration. We could track their position. So as I was saying, the new position like after delta t time would be initial position vg times delta t, and it directly comes by solving this equation by putting right hand side equal to 0. Okay, so we get the drift of the particle, like how what would be the new position of the particle. Okay, so before going into the scattering term, we would come back to this pseudo temperature. Like, what is this pseudo temperature? Because now the particle has drifted. So let's say this is our domain. Particle started from here. It got drifted to maybe let's say this cell. Now it came to this cell. So this was its r of t. This is new position is r of t times t plus delta t. So after the drift phase, so not just one particle, we could have like as I said, 10 to the power 6 particles we could consider. Many such particles could arrive at different bins. So maybe let's say this particle arrived at this bin, particle from here could arrive here, here could arrive there. So particle could go to different bins. So after this drift phase, like we could tally how many phonons are there in the each spatial bin. Like so basically in this bin we could see there is one phonon, in this there is a one phonon. In some of them there could be too many or like thousands, like whatever their number is. So from this phonons, like because we know their frequencies, like we could calculate what is the energy stored like in each spatial bin, and we call it that energy ET. So we know their energy, like what would be the phonon energy, and so that would be ET. And if you remember, we have multiplied by that factor W, uh, just to take consider the total number of phonons, and that we divided by the volume. So that is the energy we know already. And let's say one particular bin. So this we did it calculation. Let's say for this bin, we calculated in that bin how many particles were there with particular frequency corresponding to that. We calculated ET. We multiplied by R factor W just for the scaling because we couldn't treat actual number of phonons before. Then we divided it by the volume. So that energy like should be equal to the like energy corresponding to like whatever the temperature we want to define. So let's say this bin is now at a new temperature, pseudo temperature T tilde. So now we could write the energy corresponding to this equilibrium temperature. If you remember, our Bose-Einstein distribution was E to the power h bar omega by kBT. So here we are taking by at the pseudo temperature. This h bar omega is the energy. So basically, this is here. So h bar omega we multiply, that's the energy, then the density of states and delta omega. So basically the number of phonons, and with the particular energy, we have to take all the bins like whatever and all the polarizations, and then we could equate these two variables. We know everything in the left hand side, we know everything on the right hand side except this T tilde. So that now by inverting the equation, we could find what is the pseudo temperature of the each bin is. Like it's a time consuming process. Like it's not a easy step because we have to take all the particles simultaneously, how many of them are there. Then at each time step, we have to tally them and then find what would be the pseudo temperature in this case. Okay, so the pseudo temperature is a like an artificial temperature that can be computed for every spatial bin, like assuming this thermodynamic equilibrium exists in that bin. So one of the assumptions we have made by using this Bose-Einstein statistics is things are in thermodynamic equilibrium, which it is not, but we are making assumption. But we are saying that they are at thermodynamic equilibrium at some pseudo temperature T bar. Also, we have to worry about this probability of TA and LA phonon. So in each bin, like maybe in this bin, TA phonon arrived, in this one, LA phonon arrived. We have to keep track of how many TA phonons are there and how many LA phonons are there. And like that information we would use later on. But from here, we wanted to define this concept of the pseudo temperature by quitting the energies. So in the next lecture, we would also define this temperature again, but the expression would be slightly different. Like we would define it two ways actually. We would find it out. Like one is T local, we would define. The T local would be slightly different than this part. Okay, so scattering pseudo temperature. So now we come to the free phonon scattering. That could be normal in class. So we have done with the drift part. We have now, like we drifted the particle. So after drifting the particle could arrive in any of the bins. We tally its energy. We found how much that each particle is contributing to the temperature and flux of that cell. Now the part is like, okay, now the particle has to leave this cell, but it would get scattered before that because the thermodynamic equilibrium has to be restored. So now the comes the function of the right hand side where the particle would get scattered. And now the how the particle would get scattered, it would be dependent on what scattering condition is there. Like so, first we would define this three phonon scattering condition, and I think we would take a 10-15 minute break, and after that break, we would start talking about the scattering condition, and then we would take actually several examples also where we would discuss like how the solution comes out. Okay, so we would take the break now.